Special thanks to my teacher, Dr. Saurabh, who has accepted to speak uh, in this webinar on the occasion of web launch of the Bhagavati book. My teachers, Dr. Delari and Dr. Praveen, who agreed to join, and dignitaries, Dr. Ranjan, who is going to help in welcoming the meeting as well as to launch the book, as Dr. Ramesh and Dr. Piyush are occupied with something personal and they're not able to join in for sure. They will still try to come in. I also thank teachers who have mentored me along the way, Dr. Vikram, Dr. Girish, Dr. Ruchi, and Dr. Alimelu, who will also give the critical opinions on the lecture and as well as on the book. I welcome Dr. Ranjan to initiate and start the webinar and the meeting. Thank you, Ranjan sir.
Good evening, good evening, friends. It's very nice to see you all here, and it's a great evening. I'm really honored and privileged to give the introductory remarks on the occasion of the webinar book launch of Cloharty and Stark's Manual of Neonatal Care, South Asian edition, edited by Dr. Naveen Jain, our beloved colleague. Now, my memory goes back in 1984 or 85. I came across this little brown spiral manual that was the original avatar of the Cloharty's manual. Ever since then, I have been using this book. I think it's already in its 8th edition, and it is great to have a South Asian edition being launched today. Several generations of medical students, pediatricians, and neonatals, residents, and consultants have been using this Cloharty and Stark's Manual of Neonatal Care. I commend the efforts of Walter Kluwer in bringing out this South Asian edition. It may not be exaggerating if I say that Cloharty and Stark's is a Bible of neonatal care, not just a manual. Everybody has used it and everybody is still using it. The second point I want to make is that the editor is none other than our soft-spoken, hardworking, systematic, and always calm and composed Dr. Naveen Jain, consultant neonatologist from Thiruvananthapuram. I congratulate him on completing this mammoth task. It is really a mammoth task of putting together so many of contributors, following it up with them, and bringing the book in this shape. Congratulations, Dr. Naveen. It is very appropriate that a short CME is also organized on the occasion, wherein leading academicians and neonatologists of the country are participating. It is all the more apt that the topic of antimicrobial usage in NICU has been selected for this evening's panel discussion. It is a grim reminder to all of us about the emerging multi-drug resistant microbes in our NICUs in our country. The doomsday is not far away if we do not tighten our belts and do something concrete and act decisively and swiftly in preventing this. I do not want to be between the delegates and the excellent CMV we are looking forward to. With these words, I hand over to Dr. Saurabh Datta. Naveen,
yes,
take over.
Yes, sir. Dr. Saurabh's talk is just about to start. Ravi, can we? And thank you to Vikram sir, Alimelu ma'am.
There you are.
To all my teachers, my seniors, my colleagues and students, I wish you all a wonderful evening. I am extremely thankful to Walter Kluwer, the publishers of Cluharty and Stark's Manual of Neonatal Care, first South Asian edition, and to Dr. Naveen Jain, the chief editor, architect, and driving force behind this edition, for having given me the unique opportunity to deliver a talk during the web launch of this prestigious book. Anyone who has anything to do with neonatology is familiar with Cluharty's world-famous Manual of Neonatal Care. We have all grown up with our personal copies of this book bulging out of the pockets of our white aprons. As students, our reverence for this book was matched only by the sincerity with which we repeatedly underlined and highlighted key sentences with pens of different colors, scribbled points on the margins, stuck self-adhesive notes on important pages, read and reread the chapters until the binding of the book itself threatened to come apart. It reflected a warm intimacy with the book, and I hope the South Asian counterpart is treated with the same unrestrained affection as its international predecessor. Every teacher wishes to see the day when his or her student excels and surpasses the teacher. Today is such a day. Naveen was my first DM thesis student in PGI. When he told me that he had been bestowed the honor of editing Cluharty's manual, my heart swelled with pride. I would like to thank him for having assembled an extraordinary cast of chapter contributors and for having invited me to update the chapter on bacterial and fungal infections. With these few words, I would like to start my talk on antimicrobials in the neonatal intensive care unit. The statistics of neonatal sepsis globally are mind-boggling, and in India, they are terrifying. Sadly, neonatal sepsis is considered so commonplace that many physicians develop an ostrich-like attitude about the statistics of neonatal sepsis, thinking that burying your head in the sand will make the statistics go away. Many others become immune to the statistics. Nothing seems to affect them. And still others develop a sense of fatalism. And unfortunately, none of these three approaches is going to work. Here is some data from hospital-based studies in India. This was published in a review by Suman Chaurasia in the BMJ in 2019. They found that the incidence of culture-positive sepsis per 1,000 live births was 16 per 1,000. 1/3 of hospital-acquired culture-positive sepsis patients died, and the three most common organisms were Klebsiella, Escherichia coli, and MRSA. So what is the crux of the problem in neonatal sepsis? Why is it such a big issue? Firstly, the signs and symptoms of neonatal sepsis are too ubiquitous. There is no ideal test for the culture negative sepsis group, which forms a very big group and creates confusion in diagnosis. The risk of mortality in untreated or delayed treated sepsis is just too high, so physicians don't want to take a chance. Higher generation antibiotics, especially in India, are too easily available, and all this has resulted in rising antimicrobial resistance. What are the antibiotics used in India? This was a multi-country, multi-center study called the NEO-AMR study, whose results were published in 2020. Just a bit of a background, the WHO 2017 Essential Medicines list has 3 categories for antibiotics. They call it the access antibiotics, or in other words, first line, watch antibiotics, which should be used with some caution, the second line, and reserve antibiotics, which should be the last resort. Now here is data from 9 Indian neonatal units that was a part of this study. Early onset sepsis, of the 9 units, 3 used second line or watch antibiotics. For late onset sepsis, again 3 used second line and 1 in fact used last resort antibiotics. For meningitis, which is scary, none of the units used any first line antibiotics. Everybody used second line or last resort antibiotics. And that of course has resulted in resistance to antibiotics in South Asia. Again, data from that same systematic review. there is data both from hospital-based as well as community-based health setups. And I would like to focus your attention on the purple bars, which reflect resistance to meropenem, and the black bars that reflect multi-drug resistance. So note that Acinetobacter has more than 65% resistance to meropenem, and Klebsiella, E. coli, and Acinetobacter have huge amounts of multi-drug resistance, in the order of about 50 to 80%. The situation is slightly better in the community-based setup, but even there is high resistance to common antibiotics like ampicillin and gentamicin. So what are the simple measures that all of us can start adopting in the NICU right from today? The first is we can make efforts to improve diagnosis. Send at least 1 ml of blood in blood culture bottles. I think there's enough evidence that 0.5 ml will not do. Of course, ideally you should be sending 2 blood cultures, but that's not always feasible. But at least in those with central lines, an effort should be made to send 2 blood cultures. Use negative tests of CRP, procalcitonin, or IL-6 to avoid starting antibiotics, but do not rely on positive tests to start antibiotics unless the values are very high. Secondly, choose the right antibiotics based on your local organism profile and sensitivity profile, and based on organ localization. Stop or de-escalate antibiotics as early as possible, and this decision could be based on negative blood culture reports, using empirical short durations of antibiotics, using serial biomarkers until they turn negative, looking at the clinical course of the patient, and reviewing the need for continuation of antibiotics on a daily basis during the rounds. So I cannot, of course, cover everything, but I'm going to highlight a few of these points in the rest of my talk. Using negative PCT or CRP, choosing an antibiotic policy based on local organism profile, and negative blood cultures, empirical short durations, and serial biomarkers. So starting with the first question, should you use procalcitonin or CRP or both for ruling out sepsis? These are the results from a systematic review of a head-to-head comparison between procalcitonin and CRP published in 2019. So in the first column, you have the number of studies. So they included 12 studies dealing with early onset sepsis, 12 with exclusively late onset sepsis, and 15 that had patients both with early and late onset sepsis. And this is a comparison of the median sensitivity between procalcitonin and CRP. Remember that when you're looking for a test to exclude sepsis, you need a high sensitivity. Specificity is not something that important. So look at the results. PCT scores over CRP in terms of median sensitivity for early onset sepsis. The same story with late onset sepsis and with a mix of early and late onset sepsis. And they both perform better in late onset sepsis than early onset sepsis. So what about combining the results of CRP and PCT? So this is a meta-analysis that looked at this issue, published in 2018, 28 studies, 2,661 subjects. So the first column here shows the results of studies looking at CRP alone, the second looking at procalcitonin alone, and the third where results of the two were combined to take a decision. And as you can see, when the results of both are combined, the sensitivity, specificity, and area under the ROC curve are all better than using CRP and PCT alone. So what are the messages from the last two slides? That between the two, if you have an option, procalcitonin appears to be a shade better than CRP, and combining the results of both is better than using either alone if you can afford to do both the tests. Okay, here is a study on cord blood and 24-hour IL-6, and there is a reason why I have included results of this particular study. So the investigators took 30 patients with sepsis, 34 with no sepsis, cord blood IL-6 cutoff of 262 picograms per ml, and they found that there was a significant a trend towards a significant difference, p-value of 0.06, when they combined results of cord blood and 24 IL-6 with the 24-hour cutoff being 55 picograms per liter. Again, a comparison showed a strong trend towards a difference. And I must tell you who the name of the first author is of this work. It's Dr. Naveen Jain. This was his DM thesis submitted in 2001. And it really gives me goosebumps to think that exactly 2 decades later, we have all gathered here to celebrate the launch of a book which he has edited. Well, going on to the next question, how do you choose empiric antibiotics? So the choice of empirical antibiotics must be based upon the local data of etiologic organisms and their antibiograms. There's no other shortcut. The general principles are avoid third generation cephalosporins unless you're treating meningitis, and try to combine antibiotics with known synergism. So how do you go about making an antibiotic policy? Collect data for at least 6 to 12 months, get to know the etiologic bacteria and their sensitivity, tabulate the frequency of etiologic organisms and their sensitivity, determine the sensitivity to common antibiotic combinations because you will be probably using 2 antibiotics together. Choose the first line empiric combination which should cover at least around 70% or more of the bugs, and then choose the second line and reserve antibiotics which should be able to cover a much higher percentage of the etiologic organisms. Now for units without access to local antibiotic data, where very few strains are likely to be resistant to the common antibiotics, for septicemia and pneumonia, one should still try and use ampicillin or cloxacillin combined with gentamicin and amikacin. And for meningitis, use ampicillin and cefotaxime. Where most strains are likely to be resistant, you may use either ciprofloxacin or piperacillin tazobactam with amikacin maybe as a first line, and as a second line meropenem, and you can add vancomycin if MRSA is suspected. And this slide is courtesy Dr. M. Jeevashankar from AIIMS, New Delhi. How about changing antibiotics after you've got the culture sensitivity report? Now this is an equally important thing as the empiric policy. So if the report shows resistance to the empirical antibiotics and the neonate is not showing satisfactory improvement, you may upgrade to the simplest and narrowest spectrum sensitive antibiotic available. If the neonate shows clear-cut clinical improvement, one may cautiously continue with the empirical antibiotics, assuming in vivo sensitivity, but avoid resistant antibiotics if there is CNS or other deep-seated infections. Now, the really important point is, if the report shows sensitivity to simpler antibiotics, de-escalate to the narrowest spectrum sensitive antibiotic, even if the patient was improving on your empiric combination. And remember to include the duration of the sensitive empiric antibiotics while calculating the total duration. And of course, the advantages of de-escalation are obvious. The next question is, how long to give antibiotics before you get a negative blood culture? So here is data regarding the incubation time for neonatal blood cultures to become positive. So these authors took 437 positive blood cultures and found out the time for the blood culture to become positive. So what percentage became positive by 24 hours, by 48 hours, and 72 hours. And as I have highlighted here, you can see that there is a difference between gram-negative and gram-positive organisms. Gram-negative organisms, more than 90% become positive within 24 hours, as opposed to gram-positive organisms. This is another study which we had published a couple of years ago, where we looked at 845 positive blood cultures, the time to positivity of Bactrilert blood cultures. And here again, you can see that gram-negative organisms, the maximum time they took to become positive was 26 hours. So what does this tell us? That gram-negative cover can be stopped after 24 hours if the culture is sterile. You do not have to wait for 48 hours. If you are relying on the blood culture report, that is. So how long to give the antibiotics? Now this is the, these are the conventional textbook durations that I mentioned, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with them. So if it is, you're dealing with suspected sepsis, subsequent clinical course and biomarkers are not suggestive of sepsis, you stop as soon as the blood culture is reported sterile. Within 24, maximum 48 hours for gram-positive cover, you have to stop antibiotics. If you're dealing with culture negative probable sepsis, maximum of 5 to 7 days. Culture positive sepsis with no meningitis, maximum 14 days. Meningitis, 21 days. Ventriculitis, 4 to 6 weeks. And similarly with bone and joint infections and deep-seated abscesses, 4 to 6 weeks. Now, the sobering fact is that none of the above durations of antibiotics are based on strong evidence, and they have all come into clinical practice only by convention. The National Neonatology Forum, led by Dr. Praveen Kumar, had made an attempt to devise clinical practice guidelines on various issues, and I was given the responsibility of chairing the group that dealt with neonatal sepsis. So one of the important things we looked at was duration of antibiotics. So we did several meta-analysis and grade recommendations. This is still work in progress. And these are my team members who are mentioned at the bottom. So we looked at various scenarios, and I'm going to just describe two of them. So when we looked at culture-proven sepsis, look at the literature on short course versus standard course of antibiotics, we were in for a shock, because for the outcome duration of hospitalization, there were just 2 RCTs providing low quality evidence, which found an absolute reduction in duration of 3 to 4.5 days. No studies on decrease in MDR and fungal sepsis in healthcare facilities, comparing short course versus long course. No studies on long-term death or NDI. For short-term mortality, just 3 RCTs, again, very low quality evidence with very serious imprecision. For relapse rate, 3 RCTs only, small RCTs with very low quality evidence, again, very serious imprecision. We then looked at meningitis, short course versus the typical 21 days. Duration of hospitalization, no studies. MDR and fungal sepsis, no studies. Long-term impact, no studies. For short-term mortality, just 1 small RCT, very low quality evidence with very serious imprecision. Relapse rate, the only RCT, it could not be calculated as there were no events. So this is a dismal scenario. This is a picture of a neonatologist writing the prescription for the duration of antibiotics, trying to look confident, but basically shooting in the dark with the help of a dim torchlight. That is the reality of the situation regarding the evidence for duration of antibiotics. So can serial CRP guide the discontinuation of antibiotics? Well, here was a very famous study published by Ale et al. In 1997. Babies with clinically suspected sepsis who are receiving antibiotics who had a CRP more than 10 at 24 to 48 hours. The CRP was repeated daily. In the first group, antibiotics were stopped as soon as the CRP became less than 10, irrespective of clinical signs. In the second group, antibiotics were given more than 5 days and stopped only if the baby became asymptomatic. In the first group, they gave antibiotics for a mean of 3.7 days, which was significantly less than the second group, which was 5.5 days. And interestingly, there were no relapses in the first group, whereas there were 2 relapses in the second group. So it seems that you could stop antibiotics earlier based on certain biomarkers. Here are a few more studies, Jaswal et al., Numben Japon et al., all showing the same outcome, that there was no difference in the relapse rate. But unfortunately, these are all very small studies. And here is a study published in 2013 in early onset sepsis, which basically showed that if you did a CRP at 18 hours and if it was less than 10 in an asymptomatic patient who is at risk of early onset sepsis, the chances of proven sepsis is virtually 0. So here is an RCT, serial CRP for suspected sepsis. This was published as a conference abstract in 2018, and unfortunately the full paper has not yet been published. So this was an RCT done in a developing country, 60 subjects in each arm, serial CRP in the intervention arm, antibiotics were stopped when there were 2 normal CRPs 24 hours apart, and standard duration in the control arm. And what is interesting is that there was no readmission for a relapse within a week in the intervention group, 4 readmissions in the control arm. So the message is, and it's a cautious message, that based on daily CRP, antibiotics may be stopped if the CRP is less than 10, even if the patients are mildly asymptomatic. In suspected early onset sepsis, antibiotics can be stopped if the baby is asymptomatic and the 18-hour CRP is negative. Can procalcitonin guide the discontinuation of antibiotics? This is a famous Neopin study, a multi-center study to shorten the duration of antibiotics in early onset sepsis, published in The Lancet. This was the nomogram of procalcitonin that was used in the study, because as you know, procalcitonin has a physiological rise and then a fall in the first 72 hours. And here are the results. So they had a huge number of patients. This was both a superiority and a non-inferiority trial. So in the superiority aspect, it was found that the mean antibiotic duration in the PCT guided group was shorter than the standard group. Even the duration of hospitalization was less. Whereas in the non-inferiority aspect of the trial, there was no significant risk difference in the relapse rate or death between the two groups. That means shortening the duration did not adversely affect the neonates. Here is an RCT PCT guided decision making and suspected early onset sepsis. Again, unfortunately, only a conference abstract, not published as a full paper, where they had 71 subjects in the control arm and 79 in the procalcitonin arm antibiotics stopped when PCT was less than the age-related cutoff values. And what did they find? That when the kids were evaluated at 72 hours, the percentage who was still getting antibiotics was significantly higher in the control arm compared to the procalcitonin arm, and there were no adverse effects of early stoppage of antibiotics. So the message is that two negative PCT values 12 hours apart can be used to stop antibiotics for early onset sepsis, but you have to use age appropriate cutoff values. Similar data for PCT to stop antibiotics are not available for late onset sepsis, and this kind of a trial is begging to be done. And head-to-head comparison between PCT and CRP for antibiotic stoppage is not yet available, but hopefully it will be soon. So to summarize, the incidence, the case fatality, and multi-drug resistance of neonatal sepsis in India are major problems. A combination of negative PCT and CRP has a sensitivity of more than 90%. Empiric antibiotic combinations must be based on local data. Antibiotics must be de-escalated as soon as possible. Gram-negative cover can be stopped if culture is sterile at 24 hours. If performed serially, CRP of less than 10 may be used to stop antibiotics. Robust data is available for using two negative PCT values to stop antibiotics for early onset sepsis. There is only so much that can be covered in about 20 to 25 minutes, and I know I have not been able to do full justice to this topic, which ideally requires around 20 hours of discussion. And once again, I would like to thank Naveen and the publishers of this manual for having invited me to deliver this talk. And I thank all of you for having listened patiently. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, sir. My students all over the and friends all over the country are listening to not just antibiotics on how to make presentations, how to be very clear in the communication. To Praveen sir for his discussion, sir. Praveen sir, please.
Thank you, Naveen. And so first of all, thanks to Dr. Saurabh for his wonderful presentation in his typical trademark style, giving very kind of clear answers to practical questions related to a complex and confusing topic. I'm sure although he has given clear guidelines and answers to many practical questions, but I'm sure the audience would still possibly want to ask a lot of questions, and I don't know, I can't seem to write in this question and answer box, but I hope the panelists are. I can't visualize anything, so all the attendees are requested to post their questions in this Q&A box. I hope it's visible in your screen downstairs, and so that we can try to address some of these questions at least for maybe more clarification if something which bothers you. So while people are trying to do that, I take this opportunity to congratulate Naveen for the wonderful and hard work which have gone into publishing this South Asian edition of Kloharti's manual. And I'm sure with the added Indian flavor and contextual kind of information guideline, this will be much more useful than the original edition, which obviously directed towards a different audience. So I am sure this will be very, very useful to all the readers. So I'm yet to see any questions so far, except for congratulations and yeah. So meanwhile, maybe Saurabh, I can start maybe asking you the question.
So there are some questions which are posted on the chat box. So if you wish, I can speak out those questions for you.
I can't see any chat box in my screen. I can
So
see
there's
only
a question which is sure, sir. So there's a question that has come up, which is the choice of antibiotics in EOS depend on antibiotics given to mother? Hope I was clear in my voice. The question is the choice of antibiotic in EOS depend on antibiotics given to mother?
Okay, Saurabh, can you hear the question?
Yeah, I heard the question.
Yeah. So maybe you can try to address that.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of data showing that the organisms as well as the sensitivity profile of early onset sepsis in South Asia, particularly India, is the same as late onset sepsis. And it does not seem to make much of a difference as to the time of onset of sepsis and what antibiotics the mother has been given. So the antibiotic policies would remain the same, more or less.
Yeah, and I think with due respect to the obstetricians, I think the antibiotic policies followed by obstetricians often are not really based on the organism profile or the sensitivity. So I would agree with Saurabh. So Saurabh, now I can see a couple of questions. So one is about what is the PCT procalcitonin cutoff for EUNS and LONS?
Yeah, so in the first, I think he's asked the question in the context.
Yeah, Saurabh, at least I can't hear you. Maybe I don't know others can hear.
There was a loss of voice.
So you have to look at our specific nomograms to decide the cutoffs. These our specific nomograms are given both in a famous study by Chiesa et al. Chiesa, Chiesa et al. They did one of the largest studies to establish a nomogram in the first 72 to 96 hours, and that's a paper which is worth reading. Or you could look at the Neopins study, which converted that nomogram into practical stepwise cutoff values in the first 72 hours. And above those values, you would consider it to be positive.
So can you give a typical number? I guess it's very high value, especially in the first 48, 72 hours.
I mean, it goes above 10 actually in the at about, I think, 24 hours, it goes above 10. And then it finally drops down to around 0.5 somewhere at around 96 hours.
Yeah, so I think that's an important point to remember, because if we tend to follow the usual cutoffs of more than 2, then we will end up unnecessarily treating in the first 48, 72 hours. So do look at the nomogram, what Saurabh has advised. Saurabh, there's a question about how would you approach culture negative sepsis regarding duration of antibiotics? I think you did allude to it, but maybe you can re-emphasize.
Yeah, so if it is culture negative sepsis and your clinical course doesn't look like sepsis, that the patient improves very rapidly, you found some alternative diagnosis, and if your culture is sterile, your biomarkers are negative, I would actually say don't continue antibiotics beyond 24 to 48 hours. If some biomarker is positive, or your clinical course is a little more prolonged, looks a little more typically like sepsis, no alternative explanations, then up to 5 to 7 days of antibiotics. Once in a while, you may face a situation where the patient has a very stormy course, gone into what you think is septic shock, required inotropes, or has sclerema or DIC and so on, and culture comes sterile, you have no other alternative explanation, then one may give for longer than 7 days and typically up to around 10 days. But remember, all these things are all still just conventions. We don't really have any evidence to pick these numbers, but most people would tend to follow these figures.
Yeah, and I think one common scenario is that most people say, oh, no, baby is still having symptoms, so let me continue. So we need to remember that preterm babies would have symptoms because of several reasons, which may continue obviously. And Saurabh's, I think first or second slide did mention clearly that the signs and symptoms of sepsis are, so ubiquitous, they cannot be really easily differentiated from other diagnoses. So I think simply continuing because baby is symptomatic, that has to be really considered seriously, whether symptoms can be explained by something else. There's a question about oral antibiotics and whether we can, switch to oral antibiotics, especially when parents want to go LAMA and baby is still symptomatic, or maybe we can't access IV line. So is there any role of oral antibiotics in neonatal sepsis?
So there is actually no evidence that oral antibiotics will work. The only situation where we have sometimes given oral antibiotics is when you are dealing with one of those conditions which requires 6 weeks of antibiotics, say an osteomyelitis or something, where you may finish the therapy after giving the first 4 weeks with IV, finish it with maybe 2 weeks of oral antibiotics, something like linezolid, which has excellent oral bioavailability. But otherwise, there's really no evidence that oral antibiotics are safe, because the bioavailability of most oral antibiotics in neonates is very unreliable or unpredictable. So if you're dealing with a LAMA situation and there's no alternative, then frankly, there's really there's no guideline that you're really following. You're just doing whatever is the best possible for the patient under the circumstances and hoping for the best. So no guideline can really help you in that situation. You're doing it in the best interest of the patient. So that's all that I have to say about oral antibiotics.
I think that's possibly all of us do wish that there was a safe oral and effective oral antibiotic, but the evidence obviously doesn't help us. There is a systematic review, I think it came maybe 2 or 3 years ago in I think the journal Antimicrobials maybe, about the oral antibiotics in neonatal sepsis. So maybe people who are interested in the studies could look at that. There's a question about, is there any role of doing a vaginal swab from a mother postnatally if you suspect early onset sepsis? In other words, the obstetrician didn't send a swab, then is there any purpose or any role of doing a swab after birth?
No, I doubt whether there would be any utility of doing a high vaginal swab after birth. It's something typically done antenatally. And again, it's just a guide to your antibiotics, because remember, there's a very mixed population of bacteria. I mean, the vagina is expected to have a mixed population of all kinds of bacteria, including a whole lot of anaerobes. So that doesn't mean that the presence of bacteria there is that, that is the etiologic pathogen. So like any body surface which tends to get colonized by an entire microbiome of bacteria, simply picking it up from the high vaginal swab doesn't necessarily mean that those are the bacteria that are causing sepsis in the neonate. So it can be a guide if you are stuck. That means if you grow something unusual, high vaginal swab, you have a baby in which you've not grown anything on culture and the baby is worsening, then you may consider that, that's an organism that needs to be covered. But it cannot form the sole basis for deciding what you need to give to the baby.
Okay, and then what about the role of PCR? You yourself did a study on the utility of 16S RNA. So it's currently, is PCR of any use?
Hello.
Yes, sir. About PCR, utility of PCR. We can't hear Saurabh at the moment.
Praveen sir, would you like to make a comment while Saurabh sir comes back?
Hello.
Yeah, Saurabh, I think you're back.
Dr. Praveen, I think yeah, I mean, connectivity is a problem at home.
No problem. So about PCR, utility of PCR.
Yeah, so universal primer PCR targeting the 16S rRNA gene of bacteria has been around for quite a while, and most studies show that it for cases of neonatal sepsis because it is more sensitive than blood culture. However, because it's not universally available, this universal primer PCR technology, and because it is sensitive, there's also a problem of false positives that you need to be even more cautious about proper skin prep and avoiding contamination with PCR than what you are with blood culture. So these are the only two problems: accessibility and the worry that you may have some false positives at times with PCR. But otherwise, it is as good, if not better, than blood culture.
Saurabh, in the private sector, there are certain labs who are having, facility for these PCR panels, and they claim they can detect maybe 50 bacteria and 20 viruses and so many fungi in single sample. And if you see the reports, then they often report multiple organisms grown from the same sample. So, what is your viewpoint? Are these useful, or they are creating more confusion?
I don't know. I think PCR technology has to be combined with some kind of a pro-inflammatory marker side by side to make sense of it. Because if you have just PCR positive, it could even represent dead bacteria, because even the DNA from dead bacteria would get amplified, or dying bacteria would get amplified. The trouble is that if you are having, at least in adults, there's this whole concept of asymptomatic bacteremia. Low-grade bacteremia occurs with a whole lot of procedures and various things, which will also get picked up by PCR. So that is the worry with PCR: oversensitivity and picking up dead organisms. So I would be a little cautious, if the PCR report is showing multiple organisms, and especially if, say, inflammatory markers, if there's no host response in that particular patient, then it may just simply be a false positive.
I think we are seeing, this RT-PCR for SARS-CoV-2 creating a lot of confusion already, that because of the very high sensitivity, I think so many people are turning positive. And there's some viewpoint coming that we should look at the cycle thresholds and then only decide whether it's significant or not. Anyway, I don't know what is it. There's a question about comment on eubacterial genomic test for sepsis. I don't know, Saurabh, what is it?
Sorry, what is the question? Actually, it is
Question
breaking
is
a lot, the sound.
Comment on eubacterial genomic test for sepsis.
I won't be able to comment on that.
Yeah.
Dr. Praveen, there are also a lot of questions in a Q&A panel. Now that
Okay,
I'll
get to that now. The last question from the chat box. Although you again, kind of quite elegantly explained this, but I think this is a age-old question and about this use of CRP. So somebody is saying that in the papers he reviewed, CRP had more, CRP had more positive predictive value than negative predictive value. So does it not mean that we can use CRP to start antibiotics, whereas you said CRP should not be used to start antibiotics? Maybe you want to again elaborate.
No, I think most systematic reviews have shown that CRP has a better negative predictive value or a negative likelihood ratio compared to having a positive predictive value or a positive likelihood ratio. In fact, a recent systematic review in JAMA Pediatrics really casts doubts on the use of CRP at all in any situation. Saying that it's not the kind of reliable test we used to think it was. Unfortunately, and this is a problem not just with CRP but with most diagnostic tests, people who publish papers, they try to get a single cutoff, try to recommend a single cutoff, that if it's above this cutoff it is positive, below this cutoff it is negative, but nature doesn't work like that. So seldom will you find papers on CRP saying that if CRP is between say 10 to 25, then this is the predictive value, this is how much it predicts sepsis. If it is 25 to 50, then this is the probability of sepsis. 50 to 100, this is the probability. So you cannot lump everything together as above 10. So obviously if you get a CRP say which is above 100, then if it is a positive CRP you have to take it very seriously, which is very different from if the CRP is say 15. A 15 CRP may very well mean nothing at all. Maybe within the realm of the normal range of CRP and have very poor positive predictive value. So I think one has to take into account also the magnitude and not just talk about CRP as a positive test and a negative test, making it a very simple binary. But overall, if one has to see, then its negative predictive value is much better than its positive predictive value.
Yeah, and I think there are maybe more than 700 or 800 papers on CRP in neonatal sepsis, and obviously a lot of confusion because the population studied is different, cutoffs are different, methodology is different. I should read an article which came in IP, Indian Pediatrics, more than 15 years ago by David Isaacs from Australia. When he visited India for a conference, and he was shocked, so he wrote an editorial, The Abuse of CRP in the Neonatal Units. So I think that's worth reading. Saurabh, there's a question about erythromycin. So erythromycin is described as antibiotic of choice in mothers with PPROM. So is that sufficient in our scenario of gram-negative sepsis?
No, I think as you had yourself alluded to this earlier, that our obstetric colleagues are also continuing to use antibiotic combinations from studies done in the Western world, the Oracle trials and so on, which may not be relevant to real life situations in our setting. So we do need data on intrapartum antibiotic prophylaxis combinations which are relevant to our scenario.
Okay, so there's a question about scleroderma. If a baby develops scleroderma, then what should be the duration of antibiotics if the culture is sterile?
Well, I think I had referred to this a little earlier, that if you're dealing with extreme situations like septic shock, scleroderma, DIC and bleeding and so on, and you are attributing that to sepsis, then you do need to give longer than 7 days. So, typically something like 10 to 14 days is what one would end up giving.
Praveen sir, can I just interrupt, sir?
Yes.
And I request Saurabh sir and Praveen sir whether we can have an extended question answer session at the end of the program, because so many questions are there and many people are joined in to hear both of you. But I don't want to keep the other teachers waiting. So, Dr.
I think,
Ruchina,
most of the questions are now being repeated. So if you allow, maybe I can summarize and pick up maybe a couple of. and then we
Sure,
can
sir.
wind up.
Sure, sir.
I agree we should not prolong it too much. There's this question about PICC line. In extreme preterm neonates with PICC line, is there any role of using vancomycin infusion once a day for preventing central line related sepsis?
Praveen sir, could you please address that question, sir?
Yeah, I think there are some trials and maybe even a systematic review looking at vancomycin locks and all that. But I think the issue is of, again, developing resistance and all. So we are not utilizing this kind of approach. There are a lot of questions about viral sepsis and viral panels. Should they be done routinely? I think the information is very limited. And I agree, a lot of sepsis which we are assuming to be bacterial could be viral. But usually the facilities are not available to extensively investigate. So this requires research. And the question obviously will be, what are we going to do? Other than herpes, there is a specific antiviral drug available. There is a question about interpreting the CSF protein, cell counts, etc. So I think it's complex, and I would refer you to a systematic review done by Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who is currently working in AIIMS Hyderabad, and its paper is about to be published. So it basically says there's no clear answer, but it's good to go through that. Okay, so I don't think Saurabh is here, so maybe we can stop here. Maybe.
Thank you, sir. We will surely come back at the end, if you permit, to answer a few questions which may be important. And I would go back to Ravi to invite Ranjan sir to release the book. Both Dr. Piyush and Dr. Ramesh got held up in unusual situations. Dr. Ramesh's car had a minor accident about half an hour back. He's well, nothing wrong, but he just got occupied with the paperwork. And Piyush sir had to attend a personal family function, so he has apologized as well. So request politely Dr. Ranjan sir to officially release the book. Ravi, can you take over?
Sure, sir. So now that we are on the part where we are going to officially and formally launch the new Southern edition of the book Klohartia Manual, which is now, I think, Dr. Ranjan, I request you to please, sir, talk something about the book. And I would request all the panelists who are there, who I believe that they must have, gone into the level wherein in the previous years where they were studying, they must have gone through the book. But especially Dr. Ranjan, I request you to please, and Dr. Praveen, please request you to please take over and just launch the book officially.
Thank you, Ravi. I must say, it's a pleasant surprise that due to various circumstances, I have to launch the Kloharti and Stark's Manual of Neonatal Care. The CME, as expected, was of very good standard. Sepsis probably would have done very well as a cricketer, because for last several decades it has remained not out and features in the top 3 causes of neonatal mortality in India. Now, coming back to the book of Southeast Asia edition, if we look at it, South Asia has the dubious distinction of contributing 4 out of 10 with countries which contribute to the largest extent of newborn deaths in the world. Unfortunate, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and the morbidity is also enormous. And most of the South Asian countries are resource restricted. India may be on the upclimbing slope of developing country, but still as far as health expenditure, health sector is concerned, we are definitely resource restricted. The third point to note when a South Asian edition comes out is the affordability. I'm sure over the last decades, affordability to buy a book is not a big issue now, but with the climbing dollar and climbing pound, it may be something to think about. The most important is the relevance. As I said, ours is a resource restricted area contributing vastly to neonatal mortality and morbidity in the globe. Considering this, there was definitely a need that the Bible of neonatal care, Flaherty and Stark's Manual of Neonatal Care, had some features which would specifically be relevant to the health care of the newborns in our area. I'm glad that Walters Clover thought of this and have brought out this edition. Congratulations to them. And once again, a big congratulations to Naveen Jain for putting together all the authors and chapter by chapter, making sure that there are some editions or some things in the book which are very relevant to the day-to-day care of newborn in our area. I'm fortunate enough to be able to contribute to one of the chapters, which is hyperglycemia and hypoglycemia, and so have so many neonatologists of India done. So it is, it's our book now. South Asia edition of Manual of Neonatal Care is our book, and I hope it will find its rightful place in the bulging pockets of the frontline doctors of our country, in the neonatal units, in the libraries, and all the places where newborn healthcare is being practiced. Now, simple things like, early initiation of breastfeeding and exclusive breastfeeding when it comes to question of hypoglycemia, things like that have to be added in a book, which is, if it has to be relevant to our environment. And that has happened in the Flaherty and Stark's Manual of Neonatal Care. And you always feel happy to read a book where your own teachers, your own colleagues' names are appearing as contributors. Let us be very honest about that. So I feel South Asia edition has fulfilled many things which I have mentioned now, and I'm sure it will be very useful to the population of newborn neonatologists and pediatricians in this area of the world. I take great pleasure in launching the South Asia edition of Flaherty and Stark's Manual of Neonatal Care, and I congratulate the publishers, the editor-in-chief Naveen Jain, and all the contributors to this book. I would be very happy to hear from all the special invitees regarding their comments about this book. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. And invite Girish Gupta, sir, my mentor and teacher, for his suggestions and comments.
Gupta, your voice is not clear, sir. Sir, your voice is not audible. Naveen, can we invite right now, as Dr. Gupta is trying, can we invite somebody else to talk about the book?
Yeah, Dr. Ruchi, can you please give your comments and suggestions, ma'am?
Am I audible?
Ma'am. Clearly, ma'am.
Good evening, dear colleagues and friends. It's an honor for me to be here today. It's more than 3 decades now that the first edition of Guwahati's Manual of Neonatal Care was published. And since then, this book has reserved its place on the bookshelf of neonatal caregivers, right from house officers to consultants and professors. Now, it has become so popular because its systematic approach to the neonatal problems and neonatal diseases, simplicity in understanding, and also, helping us to apply the research in our day-to-day practice, getting from, from bench to bedside. And today we are here for the launch of South Asian edition of this book with our very own, Dr. Naveen Jain being the editor, and it's really a proud moment for all of us. Now, as all of us know, the last 3 decades have witnessed changing scenario in neonatal care in India. And with this, the focus had changed from survival to intact survival. And as neonatal caregivers, everyone is, striving for getting more and more intact survival in these small, sick preterm babies. And I think this edition will help us to march in that direction because it is adapted for local practices, the local neonatal diseases, and treatment incorporating the changes. Every chapter of this book is written very meticulously, keeping all these things in mind and what we require to do in our scenario as compared to the Western world. So I appreciate all the tremendous efforts put in by Dr. Naveen Jain, all the contributors, and I congratulate Naveen for effectively shouldering this job. I'm sure that this South Asian edition will become popular very soon and will become a must book for all of us. And I wish, Naveen and the team all the best. And I thank you for inviting me, for giving my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. So kind of you, ma'am. Vikram sir, are you there, sir?
Yeah, Naveen, I'm there. Thank you so much. Good evening to all esteemed panelists. Hearty congratulations to Naveen, close friend. Respected Dr. Ranjan Tejawar, Dr. Praveen, Saurabh, and all my friends and the participants. So I had a chance and the honor to be authoring one of the chapters when Naveen approached me with the email. Let me be very frank, it was a pleasant surprise. And I felt so proud and so happy that Naveen has been offered a chance to, edit this book. Very rightly said by Dr. Saurabh, we've all grown up with it right from our MD days. And seeing, the Indian and the South Asian adaptation was a dream come true. More so because, currently we realize that the context of the South Asian setting, especially India is one of the largest, geographical economy which occupies the South Asian context. The context is slightly different from the Western context. And more so when we, work for quality of care and enhancement of quality of care, we feel that the context becomes very, very important, and any specific process and outcome improvements, it's the context which has to be taken care of. So Naveen's done a phenomenal job of getting the context specific guidelines in place. And I was every day in my round, Naveen, I can assure you from the core of my heart, and I'm sure many of my DM students are here. Every day in the round, I tell them that get the Guwahati, the new version out, and we refer to it. And the most wonderful surprise, Naveen, which I found was the follow-up, your blue book of KIMS, which has now found, the major minor neurodevelopmental follow-up thing, which was initially, missing, and we had to refer extensively to your, that was something I was personally, very, very impressed. And that was the work which I felt was needed for the country. Also, the section on the antibiotic, we find it very, very, useful and context specific. And quality of care issues, COVID-related issues, and suggested further readings with, updated references or something. Let me be very honest. It's a thick book. We will take time to go through the whole thing, but these are the 2 or 3 areas which I have got a chance to look up in my rounds and discuss with my DM students. And all of them have been really giving raving, reviews of this. And I see Dr. Saurabh Datta and all my other colleagues also. congratulating you in this endeavor, and we look forward to a great journey ahead with this and many more, editions of the South Asian edition to go, and with Naveen in the editorial positions. Thank you so much for inviting me here, and I wish you all the best and a great journey to this great book. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I know it comes from you, from the heart. You have held my hand and taken me through the journey and brought me to the stage on several occasions. Thank you so much. Girish, sir, are you back, sir? In between, we had some audio problems.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir, clearly.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Naveen, for giving me this opportunity. I must tell you that when I entered DM, it was reading Cloharty. I learned neonatology reading Cloharty, and I passed DM reading Cloharty. So this is such a wonderful book. However, I always wondered that whatever we had in Cloharty, it was not directly relating to our environment, as simple as infection. So right from that day, I used to wonder a day would come when we would customize it to our situation. And here comes that great occasion. It is under your leadership. The Southeast Asian edition has come. I am very proud to state that it has been put in the Indian context or in the context of region, and hence it becomes highly valuable. Secondly, I always dreamt that the neonatologists of India of all levels should get a chance to contribute such a wonderful book, and it has happened. So it gives me a double pleasure. However, I am looking forward that in times to come, this should get even better with more participation of others. And I'm sure that all readers of Cloharty would get immensely benefited. With this, I congratulate Naveen, your team, and all the people that put their heart and soul to update this wonderful book. Wish a great degree of success to the publishers. They get their money back, but more importantly, we should get them more repute, and ultimately, the neonates of India get better treatment. So with this, I thank you, Naveen. Wish good luck. Thank you very much for giving me a chance.
Thank you so much, sir. Every flight that I shared with you when I used to return from a conference, you used to inspire me, try to tell me that I need to do more, try to put in more efforts, and hopefully we will do something every time to rise up to your expectations, sir.
You have satisfied more than my expectation. God bless you, Naveen.
Thank you, sir. Alimedu ma'am, thank you so much for joining in. Can we have your suggestions and comments, ma'am?
Yeah, so good evening, everybody. So greetings from Hyderabad and greetings from Nilofer Hospital. So it's my privilege, and I'm so elated to be on this platform. And Cloharty, like sir has all the seniors have mentioned, Cloharty is something that we always look back for our neonatal care, and it was always the Bible that we read before going to the NICU. And this is high time and about time, and this was really needed right now, because we are having so many issues that is different from the Western countries, and so many chapters in this book is now so so readable and relatable to our conditions. So like as Dr. Ranjan Pejawar sir has mentioned, nutrition, KMC, and so many of this developmental supportive care by Dr. Naveen Jain. I think we always, like everybody mentioned, the blue book was something we always referred to. And if I remember, the other edition of Cloharty mentioned about a car seat challenge for the very low birth weight baby when you are following up. So I was always wondering, what is this car seat challenge? And that kind of doubts which are so different from our setup to the Western setup is actually now addressed to. And if you look at the improved fluid electrolyte management, and even the hyponatremia which you mentioned in preterm, which is actually earlier, which we see in our neonatal babies, which is different from their setup. So there's so many changes. And the ABCDE of the neonatal hyperbilirubinemia, the then the scores, and then the great chapter on neonatal sepsis. I can keep going on. So I really like this book a lot, and I suggested this to all my PGs, and all of them have started reading this as well. So like we said, this is going to become a bigger success than we can imagine now, and great going, Dr. Naveen Jain. This has been an excellent book, and I really enjoy reading it every day. So thank you so much, and kudos to the whole team, and congratulations, and hoping for even better improvement in the book in the future. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for a detailed review of the book. And it would be improper for me, before I go back to the publishing team, I need to thank Dr. Saurabh sir for coming to speak. And 90% of the audience are here not because it's the launch of Guwahati, but they wanted to hear Saurabh sir. He is the most popular teacher and orator of the country. Thank you so much, sir. And personally, he has mentored, like he said, I was his DM thesis student, and I have had many snacks, tea, and statistics together at sir's home, learning how to write. And at that time, I'm sure was a disappointment, but over the years, his mentoring and experiences did help me improve. And Praveen sir, thank you so much. You have shown me not just how to do neonatology, but also how to be more practical in life, and also how to be a better human being. Dr. Derari sir had some technical glitch. He has messaged me. He made many efforts to join in, even at least as a participant, but some technical issue, and he could not join in. Ranjan sir, you have saved the occasion, not only by giving a great welcome and a great launch to the book, but also being the right person at the right place. Although I had invited Piyush sir and Ramesh sir, as they are very close to me, but I guess the right launch should have happened at the hands of the president of NNF. Thank you so much. And in absence of Piyush sir and Ramesh sir for their personal reasons, I thank them for agreeing to participate in this function. And all the panelists who are close friends and teachers, thank you so much for joining in today. Back to the publishing team, I have to personally thank Rekha and Vandana, who were guiding the content of the book all through, and Chandan, who invited me to the project. Of course, Ravi, you have been a great hit in organizing the program. Back to you, Ravi.
Thank you, Dr. Naveen. So maybe I think this is the last leg of the webinar. I thank you all the panelists who have taken a time out on the weekend on Saturday and be a part of this webinar. I request all the attendees of this webinar who have come here and listen to the senior people in this neonatology fraternity or at all. And yes, from Walter Kluwer, we are promising you to bring back some more important webinars like this in the future. Definitely in this subject area and the subject area also. So from our side, thank you so much for being part of this great webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Naveen, for this book. And I really would like to say that this was a humongous task that you did by bringing together all the contributors and working day in and day out for the book. And I would also like to thank all the panelists for this wonderful discussion. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Vandana.
Great. So let's end the show now. Thank you again to all the panelists and the attendees. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you for joining.